President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi attended the official working dinner held at the Kenyan Presidential Palace and hosted by President William Ruto of Kenya and the French President Emmanuel Macron in honor of the heads of states participating in the Africa-France Summit. Earlier on the day, President al-Sisi was received by the Kenyan counterpart William Ruto in Nairobi ahead of his participation in the Africa Forward Summit for the Africa-France Partnership. The President takes part on Tuesday in the opening session of the summit taking place in the Kenyan capital Nairobi. The two-day summit, dubbed the Africa Forward Summit for Africa-France Partnership, aims at enhancing the economic partnerships between the two sides. President al-Sisi will attend a number of sessions focusing on many topics in the economic fields, including communications, agriculture and irrigation, in addition to reforming the international financial infrastructure and the access of the African states to sustainable funding. On the sidelines of the summit, President al-Sisi will also meet several African leaders and the chiefs of international organizations.
Kenyan President William Ruto received more than 30 African leaders, including President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who kicked off a summit with French President Emmanuel Macron in Nairobi as Paris sought new deals and partnerships.
The Africa Forward Summit is the first France has organized in an English-speaking nation since it began holding such events in the 1970s, with Macron saying that he aims at promoting the French new approach to Africa at the summit. More than 30 African leaders, including President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, gathered for a summit with the French President Emmanuel Macron in Kenya on Monday, as Paris sought new deals and partnerships amid signs of fading influence in some of the former colonies on the continent. The Africa Forward Summit is the first that France had organized in an English-speaking nation and follows a series of setbacks in West Africa, where some Francophone leaders have cut back on security and commercial links with Paris. Macron said that Africa and France were equal partners with the common objectives and announced that 23 billion euros of investments, 14 billion from French companies and 9 billion from African ones, have been mobilized through the summit. France, which has organized similar events in French-speaking nations since the 1970s, has touted the rising trade with African countries, though it has experienced disappointments too. Last year, William Ruto's government terminated a $1.5 billion highway expansion deal with a consortium led by the French Vinci SA and handed it to Chinese firms after the Kenyan authorities said that it saddled them with too much risk. Kenya hopes to use the summit to attract the French investors looking to take advantage of the Pan-African Free Trade Area and to advance talks on making the global financial system fairer to heavily indebted African countries. The Kenyan president will attend the G7 summit next month at the invitation of France, where he plans to push for the global action to improve the continent's access to credit. Macron on Sunday downplayed the absence of some leaders at the summit, noting that several West African heads of state and civil society representatives would be there.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Badr Abdulati reiterated Egypt's firm stance in support for the UN Security Council's reform and expansion being an urgent priority to reshape international governance. The minister made these remarks as he delivered Egypt's speech at a ministerial meeting on the reform drive of the Council on the sidelines of his participation in the France-Africa Summit in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Egypt's top diplomat called for removing the historic justice befalling Africa, given its continued deprivation from permanent representation at the UN Council. He cited African fair and permanent representation among the top topics on the Council's reform process, leading that African states obtain all rights and privileges granted to member states, including the right to veto.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Badr Abdulati and the Turkish counterpart Hakan Fidan stressed the keenness on boosting bilateral ties to serve the interests of both countries. During a phone call, they discussed the escalation efforts in the Middle East and reviewed the latest developments of the negotiating track between the United States and Iran. The top diplomats reaffirmed the importance of the diplomatic solution as the only means to end the war. They also stressed that reaching regional security and stability depends on favoring the political settlements.
The Foreign Ministry is closely following up on the incident of hijacking a ship from the Yemeni regional waters and was led to Somalia. In this regard, Foreign Minister Abdulati instructed the Egyptian embassy in the Somali capital, Mogadishu, to follow up on the conditions of the 8 Egyptian sailors who were on board of the kidnapped ship and to provide them with all the needed support and aid. The top diplomat also ordered to accelerate the release of the sailors and to contact with the Somali authorities to guarantee their safety.
Egypt kept open the Rafah border crossing to the Palestinian arrivals and returnees, as well as the aid access to the Gaza Strip. The 193rd Aid Convoy of the Egyptian organized initiative, the Zaid al-Izza, entered the Strip through a subgate of the Rafah land port. The convoy is carrying 4,417 tons of food, medical and relief aid, as well as the shelter materials and the fuel supplies needed to operate the hospitals and other vital services in the territory. This came within the framework of the Egyptian efforts in coordination with the regional and the international partners to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinians in the Strip. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli inaugurated several factories at Essadat and the 6th of October series. During his tour, Madbouli asserted that industry is a key promising driver to the overall economic growth and reiterated that the state is developing the needed infrastructure to support and boost the different industry sectors. Meanwhile, Madbouli held a press conference at the conclusion of his expanded tour, during which he said that the tour included the inauguration of 2 factories, in addition to the inspection of the production lines and expansions at 5 other factories. He hailed the notable progress in the industrial production process witnessed in Egypt in the last 4 years in various sectors and the factory's ambitious expansion plans until 2030. The Prime Minister also shed light on the Egyptian successful experience at the first factory that he had visited on the tour, hailing the young workers who took part in the launch of the first trade brand of the soft drinks, now exporting to more than 48 countries around the globe.
Egypt's bourse closed in fluctuation amid sell-offs by the Arab investors and corporations against purchases by local and foreign investors and corporations. The market's capital of listed companies added 14 billion Egyptian pounds, crossing 3.8 trillion pounds at the end of an average transactions of 10.7 billion pounds. The benchmark index EGX 30 dipped 0.3% at the 54,475 point mark. The equal weighted indices EGX 70 and EGX 100 rose 0.7% and 0.6% respectively.